Thank you. So for our discussion, we prepared presentation on the paper of Bruno de Conti and Jean-François Ponceau, Digitalization of Currencies, a vector for de-dollarization. Also, we read a policy brief of the same author, Bruno de Conti, on the central bank digital currencies and the evolving international payment system. So here you can see our outline. So we're going to start with the summary of the paper, then we're going to discuss the debatable dimensions that we found on the paper, and so we're going to finish with open questions. So let's start with the summary. So overall, this article aims to investigate if the two movements, such as digitalization of currencies and de-dollarization, may be interconnected. In particular, it aims to analyze if state-led digitalization of currencies and payments, mainly through CBDCs, may be a vector for de-dollarization, and the author analyzes it in two dimensions. In the global economy and the national economies in partially or totally dollarized countries.
Okay, so in Professor Bruno's paper, he set the background with the theoretical discussion on what is dollarization, how do we de-dollarize it, why is dollarization bad, and then he proceeded to introduce us to the 4 case studies done within 4 countries and 3 levels of dollarization. Fully dollarized in Ecuador, partially de-dollarized, partially dollarized in Nigeria and Cambodia, and no significant dollarization in China. And he proceeded to analyze at the domestic level in Ecuador, Nigeria, and Cambodia, and at whether introducing the CBDC in China can lead to the global de-dollarization.
We are not going to go into the details of how the authors conduct the analysis, but we are going to go to drive you through the findings of the paper. One of the main emphasis here is the role of confidence at 3 levels, either methodical, hierarchical, or ethical. And based on this, I'm going to drive you through the findings. In the case of Ecuador, the existing institutional distrust affected the fact that it did not achieve the goal that it intended. And that's what you mentioned during your presentation. In the case of Nigeria, similar effect. There was no change in the preference of people in the use of the existing currency. So here, one of the reasons why this happens is because the deep macroeconomic fragility persisted. Now, this is interesting because in the case of Cambodia, he says, okay, but in this case, the macroeconomic data improved. So there was no change in the dollarization level. And in Cambodia, it is not a CBDC, what was implemented, but those are details that I will not have time to get into. So here in this case, there is a dual currency system working, but significantly the role of the dollar is still more important than the one of the real. In the case of China, the M-bridge shows potential, but still is not challenging directly the US dollar. And he mentions in the policy briefing the challenges that we also saw in the presentations. I will not go into the details, but it's data storage, server and computing power, software, network infrastructure as well. And so with this, I will start with the debatable dimensions. And I would like to start bringing the multi-level perspective, so some governance insights into the discussion. For this, we discussed Gil's. Sorry, I forget to breathe sometimes. So in this case, he analyzes transitions at 3 levels to understand how these transitions may happen and how they evolve. For this, he considers 3 levels at which transitions may occur. So first of all, the thing about niches, and this is the micro level. And the idea is that these are protected spaces in which innovation emerges, and this innovation can pose a challenge. However, for a niche to have a potential success, they require a lot of support because this is a level in which things are fragile. And they require regulation. So at a meso level, we enter into the socio-technical regime. In the socio-technical regime, we have institutions, we have regulation, and we have incumbent actors. And this can create the protected space for niches, for innovations, but they also can pose a risk for the niches, because if the innovations are not regulated, if the innovations are not pushed through to success, they will somehow dry out in the regime. And the socio-technical landscape is the bigger level of the discussion, which is external environment. So in this case, for example, we can talk about the dollar hegemony at a global level would be in the socio-technical landscape. And in this case, it has all the power to pressure the regime and the niche, and that means that for example, if we're thinking about a CBDC would be in the niche level, and a regime could be regulation to help it become more important. However, a socio-technical landscape, which implies a lot of power exerted from nations, could imply that these CBDCs could somehow not succeed as they are not going to expand through the system. We can think about Schumpeter here as well, but let's not do that. So in this sense, what we can see from the reading and using this framework of analysis, we get to a similar conclusion as you do, which is that this seems to be an adaptation within the existing regime and landscape instead of a change from it, which means that in the end, it could be a form of reinforcement of the existing dollar hegemony.
So the next debatable dimension we would like to move forward is modern monetary theory. So the authors conclude in the article that creating a digital currency is not enough to reduce the dependency on the US dollar. And that technology cannot replace trust and credibility. However, we thought that modern monetary theory could greatly complement the arguments of the author. First of all, the main arguments of the modern monetary theory is that a government with full monetary sovereignty, so when it issues its own currency, does not peg it to another currency, and does not borrow it in foreign currency, faces no hard financial limits on its spending. And in this way, it can finance social programs, infrastructure, and other public expenditures. And by MMT, the main constraint is not the deficit, since with full monetary sovereignty, the country cannot be restricted by budget deficits, but the main constraint in the risk of inflation. So we thought that the perspective of MMT could complement the author's argument, since when a nation is dollarized, it becomes a user of the money, but not a creator of the money. So this means it still cannot run large public programs or respond more flexible to the crisis, since firstly it still must obtain its foreign currency. And in this way, MMT would say that the main obstacle to de-dollarization is not the lack of the digital currency, but the loss of the monetary sovereignty itself. So CBDC may help only when the state already has full monetary sovereignty. Otherwise, in this way, the country just digitalizes its dependency instead of removing the root of the problem. It adds that the true de-dollarization requires restoring political control over money creation, but not digitalizing the existing system and problem of monetary dependence.
Okay, so with regard to CBDC, not really solving the problem, and might it just be transform the dollar to digital dollars. So in this case, I will present the case of maybe yuanization, or like e-yuan. Okay, so first, do we have to fear yuanization? Because dollar do the same and we have dollarization. But now China is introducing M-bridge. Will it lead to yuanization? So first, I would like to introduce the very interesting theoretical background from Professor Bruno's papers. So we are saying that, okay, money is power. Power how? So first, the dollar privilege and hegemony. We can see that, okay, in the recent geopolitical concern, we are seeing the freezing of Russian bank by US. And also we have something called hysteresis. I think in the morning we have some agent-based modeling class. Is it a path dependence, a shock which lasts indefinitely in the system? So we can see that dollarization is pretty hard to reverse. We see the case of Ecuador, Nigeria, Cambodia, and most of all, it's destroying the monetary sovereignty of a nation, which means that nation have to rely on the US dollar itself. And furthermore, in the policy brief paper, we can also see not only the monetary sovereignty is compromised, but also your technological sovereignty and data privacy, like in the case of hosting your digital currency on Google Cloud, or even using the platform that China is using and not using your own platform, not developing your own platform. And as you can see, China is moving as a lender to many countries. In the paper, we have seen that China has lent money to Ecuador. And also, we have seen, like in the recent past, China is also investing heavily in the infrastructure in Africa, and they own a lot of debts to also China. And as we can also see, Chinese yuan can also be seen as a tool to internationalize the Chinese currency. Okay, so in the end, I have talked a lot, and do we have to fear yuanization? For now, no worries yet. You can see from the graph that the Chinese yuan is the yellow color. You can see it's upcoming in the latest like 5 or 10 years, but in the end, it's still nothing compared to the US dollar and EU. So, and furthermore, we also conclude from Professor Bruno's study that a lot of countries also considering CBDC, and there's a lot of CBDC project and also cross-border transaction. You can see the M-Bridge here with Hong Kong, Thailand, China, UAE, and also Saudi Arabia, and many more, including also countries in the global north, like France, and many countries in the global south also. So, in the end, so we don't have to fear the Chinese yuan taking over the US dollar yet. But just because it is not coming doesn't mean that we don't have to fear them. We don't have to do anything at all. So what can we do with regard to, okay, protecting our money sovereignty, our technological sovereignty? So because like, in the end, please take a look at the graph over on the right side. I'm from Thailand, and I'm one of the members in the M-Bridge project. And as you can see over here, the yellow is China. And most of the transaction that is occurring is we are dealing with China. This is the data back in 2021, so I'm not very sure how is it going. And you can see mainland China have also a lot of trade with Hong Kong, and most of the trade is doing with Thailand also. And we are dependent. We import a lot. China is our first import partner. So we are somewhat dependent, not only on the monetary side, but also on the economic side. So in the end, the CBDC, as well as it, they can use to de-dollarize, but still it's a fiat money. Fiat money is like the money that the government decreed that, okay, please trust in our money. You can use it, but we can do whatever we want with it. That means state can manipulate the CBDC. And why we can see from the IMF data on the reserve that yuan is not a concern right now, we still have concern over the technological aspect, the regulation aspect. Like for example, what if one day China just tell to Thailand that, okay, you will have a social credit, and if your credit go under this score, you have to do something to fix it. And also the data privacy. We are using a platform that China is make. We are using the server that it hosts on someone lands. So it is still a concern. So how can we mitigate this? We could say DeFi, Bitcoin, everyone, very beautiful words. But what does it mean in the end? So it is a decentralized and programmable, which means that it is not up to only a single person jurisdiction. It is programmed. If you say this, then you always abide by this, assuming it's open source, of course. And it is one of the solutions to minimize the discretionary money manipulation. That means you cannot print money, you cannot adjust your interest rate to adjust the supply. But this is also it leads to our open question, like, okay, where do we stand between this CBDC and DeFi? Like, DeFi is just privatized entirely. And the CBDC is like state control. Where does it lie between these two? What is the correct way to go in the future? And that being said, let me segue to the open questions.
Okay. So the first one we would like to ask you, and to start off, it's related to the point we were mentioning at the beginning, and is if the current wave of digital monetary innovation could represent a shift in the geopolitics of money or simply reproduce it. How do you stand in that first point that we made?
And for the second questions, with regard to the global South country, South at in Latin American is south of US, and Asian is south of China. So if the project like mBridge succeed, do we envision the future where there is like multiple market, multiple digital currency, multiple platform for each of the zone? Or we will just witness the new digital hierarchy, like let's say the yuanization scenario that I just painted, where it's just lead instead of the dollar being the one who is leading?
And our last question is, could CBDC pose a threat to and some risks to the global South countries, especially taking into account that they rely on the technological standards, and also whether the global South countries could really influence the shape of the global financial system, considering that they're still norm setters and the global North countries set the technological standards for CBDC?
Okay, so this is our bibliography. Thank you, Professor Bruno and Professor Jean-François. Sorry for my pronunciation, for your amazing work, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks a lot, Alona, Daniela, and Suppadet, for the very interesting reading and comments and questions as well. It was very interesting how you've been, you went from this text and this topic to diverse aspects of the CBDC, which can be studied as something related to innovation or to monetary issues. So this is something of it shows the complexity of the topic, but at the same time that there is floor for lots of research. So congratulations, it was really, really nice. And then I'll go directly to the questions. The first one is, maybe I'll combine some elements of the two questions. But then I think that there are elements which show that technology can be used to try to reduce the dependency on the US dollar. But as I said, it's not enough at all. And what is the main aspect that can be understood as a possible vector for de-dollarization is the reduction of the past dependency, you know. So if you are creating new systems, then we can think of these new systems in a way that can, reduce, because when we think about dollar hegemony, we are thinking about everything that is happening now, but also on the stock that is already composed, and it creates a kind of a trap for the US dollar, right? We are thinking of, to put in simple terms, flows, but also stocks. The stock of Helsinki is in US dollar, contracts are in US dollar, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of aspects which concur to the continuation of dollar hegemony, but whenever there is the possibility of creating new platforms, for instance, it may, in a certain way, reduce the past dependency. And then if M-bridges become something interesting, then, well, maybe it can reduce a little bit at least the dependency on the US dollar. But as I said, I really don't see this single transformation of money into digital money, or this money revolution as stated by the IMF, as enough to dethrone the dollar. What I do see is that there are some movements going on, and then this one related to technology, to innovations related to CBDCs, can be another push, you know, in this direction, but not as something that in itself will solve any problem. Far from that. But at the same time, the future is completely unpredictable for several reasons. As I said, because the US is reacting, because there is this strong struggle between two paths, the one with CBDCs and the one with stable coins, and because the US is the extent to which the reactions of the US will come are completely unpredictable, right? So and they have power to do strong responses, and that's why I think that this idea of the structural power is so important, because they can change the systems from inside in a way that can at the end reinforce their hegemony, right? So I'm sorry, I was very confusing in my answer, but I was just trying to say what I said in the presentation with different words, which is, well, there are movements in the direction of the transformation of the international monetary and financial system. This innovation related to money is part of the movement. In itself, it won't mean a big thing, but together with the other things, we can see, not in the near future, but in the long term, transformations of the world, you know. But then, of the international monetary and financial system. Then we come to the other questions. In which direction? One possible transformation is the UNization, as you said. And this won't be the solution, I agree with you. Because then, well, if you have a dependency on a new currency, a new national currency, it's not the solution, right? That's why discussions around the possibility of using the national currencies, and these discussions are very hot in this moment as well, in several dimensions. Loans from multilateral banks in national currencies instead of loans in dollar. Payments for cross-border, for trade, let's say, in national currency instead of paying in dollars. It's so important. Again, there is a tendency of the world economy to converge into some more important currencies, and by far the most important currency is still the dollar. So it won't mean the transformation of the whole situation. But it's already a good thing if Brazil and South Africa can start doing trade in the national currencies, you know. And if you rely in these new platforms, maybe it can be one of the vectors that can push in this direction. Then going to the question, the very important third question. I totally agree with what is behind the question, that Global South countries, in order to try to create or to strengthen their monetary sovereignty through CBDCs, they cannot forget that there are other kinds of vulnerabilities related to technology. So this example of the Eastern Caribbean Union is the worst example, right? So how do you want to raise your sovereignty, monetary sovereignty, thinking only in the aspect of having a digital currency, trying to curb the dollar and so on and so forth, but then you put your whole system in the hands of a foreign private company which will host your whole system and so on and so forth. So it has to be analyzed in a case-by-case study. But I do agree that this is one of the most important things that have to be in the heads of those in the different central banks in the world of the Global South, which are leading those projects, right? How to think on money, monetary sovereignty, but without implying that these new CBDCs will increase the dependency on external technologies, right? Let me see if there is something. Oh yes, yeah, I guess I touched the second one as well. I do see the possibility of this fragmentation. And then as maybe I can finish here in some seconds. As I said, there is a convergence, a natural trend, in economics is not never natural, but well, there is a convergence into some currencies, which comes from the mere fact that if everybody wants to use their own currencies, it will be a mess. Like there is this comparison between currencies and language. I don't know if you heard about it. If everybody starts speaking his or her own language, nobody understands each other, you know. And with currencies, it's only useful if it's useful for the third party. So it leads naturally to a convergence in some currencies. Right, and then obviously those some currencies are those of the powerful countries of the world, no doubt about it. But we have moments in which we have a more fragmented international monetary and financial system. We had it in the interwar period, for instance, and then possibly, I don't say I am not predicting it, but it is a possibility. That there are enough signs to show us that countries are trying to avoid the dollar. So it may lead to a kind of, as you say, a fragmentation of different platforms, each of these platforms trying to use the national currencies of these respective countries, and so on and so forth. And then if nothing happens, the tendency will be a convergence into a new platform, a new currency, and so on and so forth. If it will be the dollar or the yuan, it depends if we will have or not a hegemonic transition. At the end of the day, this is the conversation, right? Are we having or not a hegemonic transition? But we can have moments of fragmentation, right? And also, there is always the theoretical possibility of a supranational regulation, a supranational design of a new system, which is not very viable in political terms, at least nowadays. But this possibility, theoretically, it has always existed and it still exists. But well, sorry if in the beginning of my answers I was very confusing, but I hope at least something was clear.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Then we'll go.
Oh yeah, it works. Okay, everyone. So we're gonna start the Q&A. We still have about 25 minutes, I believe, almost 25. So hopefully it leads to a nice little exchange. I don't know if there's a specific way of organizing that. Otherwise, I would just say, please raise your hands. Perhaps briefly introduce yourself. But yeah, sorry, you wanted to say something. You're more used to it.
For you to know that the way we usually do, we gather 4 questions at the beginning: name, country, question, 4 questions.
Okay.
Then you answer the 4 questions, and then we go like in little groups of questions.
Okay, perfect. So 4 questions. Who starts? Okay. Well, I'll try to take a little bit like this. I'll take one here.
Well, my name is Luca. I'm from Brazil. I studied at UFMG. And, well, there is this very well-known Marxist debate on money from Leda Paulani, and also in France, like Suzanne de Bronhoff. And there's this book by Suzanne de Bronhoff, like, which is State Capital Economic Policies. So I would like just to make a question about this part of economic policy and the interaction of CDBCs with this. Especially for Europe, because you talked a lot about the implementation of CDBCs in Europe for 2029 and so on. And I would like to know, like, how do you see the consequences for an economy that is not as planified as the Chinese and also not as libertarian as the US? Like, what's the role of Europe in this geopolitical panorama being like intertwined in those two geopolitical blocks? And also to come back to South America a bit, like there was this article by Haddad Galípolo talking about the unified currency in South America. Do you think that CDBCs would be an opportunity for South America to bypass this standard framework that is usually described for regional integration processes of like political integration being the end of the process and so on? Do you think that this is an opportunity for South America to kind of go beyond what Europe is doing now, without having to go through the standard path, as I said, of having first a non-CDBC currency and then going to the CDBC step?
Two questions for a price of one. No worries. Okay, I'll go here.
Hi, my name is Astou and I'm from Senegal. I had this question that might displace the debate a bit, because like if you think about West African currency, the franc CFA, and the fact that it is institutionally tied to the euro, and today the fact that there is this debate on top of the de-dollarization, the de-eurotization, do you think that CBDs can be a way or a tool to actually work toward independence, or at least a reduction of the dependency of franc CFA to euro?
Someone behind you kept her hand up the whole time, so
Thank you. Hello, my name is Briana. I'm from Brazil. I study UFSC. And I would like to return to the point you mentioned about BRICS. And during the presentation, you mentioned several times about the US movement to protect its status quo. And then when we think about the BRICS pay that is stepped back, the design of the currency of the financial system, but at the same time we have a really strong new development bank that financials the infrastructure and projects in their own currency. Do you see as this step back from the BRICS pay can be relation to this movement of the US to defend its status quo? Thank you.
Last one over there. Can you pass it over there?
Hello, I'm Luca from Brazil as well. I'm from Unicamp as well. So that's, but it's a little bit of a predictive question, trying to predict the unpredictable future. But the last time the dollar hegemony was put in question, the Volcker resorted to an interest rate shock that had many consequences, right? And it kind of was successful in reaffirming and absorbing all the liquidity from the world and reaffirming the hegemony of the dollar, and kickstarting the strong dollar policy. I also am quite skeptical in the prospect of the dollar hegemony being under real threat, but the White House and the U.S. media seem their posturing is very aggressive towards any disturbance in the status quo of the dollar hegemony. So, can we imagine a world in which a spiritual successor to the Volcker shock happens in terms of rising the interest rates, and what are some of the consequences that could arise in a world that is, fundamentally different than the one that we lived in the 70s?
Okay, thank you. So the Brazilian took over this round of questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the very interesting questions. Let me go into them. Maybe Maybe I start with the one on the BRICS, and then I can go to the others, which may be related. The BRICS, they were born as an official group, having as one of the main claims precisely the reform of the international monetary and financial system. I was tracking it, and the very first official document, it was some weeks after the Lehman Brothers bankrupt back in 2008, and then it was a momentum in which, they were discussing the global financial crisis which was emerging, and then the need to change the international monetary financial system. And only in 2011, if I'm not wrong, the first meeting of the Minister of Trade was held of the BRICS. So it was born as a group very much addressed to deal with that. So it is still in the if we read the last final communiqué from Rio de Janeiro, it's interesting to respond to your question because the US is not mentioned in any line. It's really not mentioned, but it is in every line. For those good readers can see that, it is a dialogue with the US because they are defending multilateralism and so on and so forth. So in many dimensions, they are making this hidden dialogue with the US, but not mentioning it. And then in relation to the BRICS currency, it's a good question. I do think that the fact that Trump is there makes some of the leaders in some of these countries more afraid of doing explicit things against the US, because then it can lead to retaliations. And then in Brazil, it is a topic, I guess. But I wouldn't say it was the most important reason for the abandonment, at least so far, of the idea on the BRICS currency. The main point, to the best of my knowledge, is that they thought that it would be too complex, and it is, to create a new currency. Also because of divergences within the group, right? So those who were willing more to create a new currency were Russia and China. Brazil had internal divisions even within the government. Some people willing to do. Lula himself was in favor, apparently. But then Haddad was against, So there were divergences within the government. South African ambiguous position. Modi in India also trying to be friend of the US while being in the BRICS. And beyond those divergences, the perception that it would possibly imply a need for macroeconomic coordination. Even if it's not a currency like the euro, which would replace the national currencies of the BRICS countries, it would imply somehow, let's say, maybe it would imply exchange, somehow a kind of exchange control, between the currencies. So this whole thing made the BRICS, at least now, go in the direction of using national currencies instead of creating a BRICS currency, right? And then for the national currencies, there are some interesting initiatives which are more timid than I would expect. I would like to see something more. But still, there is the NDB. In the final communiqué, they say they are very much in favor of including new countries, which is a good sign. They mention this thing that, the NDB has a goal, a target of having 30% of the loans in the national currencies. It's still not there, but with Dilma Rousseff, it's moving in this direction. So it's having more and more loans, not in dollar, but in the national currencies, because it's important to say that even the BRICS Bank is still making more loans in dollar than in the other currencies, right? And there are some other initiatives, if you want, we can discuss it later. They are trying to improve the contingent reserve arrangement, which has a lot of failures, which go in the direction of trying to reform the international monetary and financial system. I was expecting more, but still we can see some good things in the final communiqué. and that's it. I think that there is some countries are a bit afraid of Trump, but it's not the only reason, because it's very, very complex, everything we are discussing here, the creation of a new currency and changing the international monetary and financial system. It has obstacles that go beyond the fact that Trump is there. And then to finish, it's also important to say that in this respect, Trump is more vocal, but the Democrats are the same, right? When the BRICS currency was ventilated, it was in the Johannesburg summit in 2023, and it was Biden and Janet Yellen came to the media to say, well, this idea of a BRICS currency is not a good idea. So even her, she was differently from Trump, which goes through the Twitter and so on. But still, the Democrats, in this sense, they also will react and will do whatever they can to keep the dollar hegemony, right? Then the other questions, I can try maybe to mix them. Okay. So for monetary policy, it's interesting because there are potentialities related to the CBDC, but in the case of the digital euro, which is the one you are asking, these potentialities are being somehow curbed by the regulation, because the lobby of the banks is so strong. As I try to show, some of the things that would be possible are being left beside, So, for instance, just to give one example, if we have CBDCs bearing interest rates, then it may be a channel for the central bank to make a powerful monetary policy, because then it goes directly to it's not intermediated by the banks. The changes in the basic rates go directly to its liabilities, which are in the hands of people, So, but then the ECB has decided to not bear interest rates in the digital euro. So, and also not only in terms of monetary policy, but trying to curb the power of banks, right? This whole idea of putting a cap is also a way of making the digital euro less attractive than it could be. So at the end of the day, there is even this discussion that finally, with this powerful lobby of the banks, maybe the digital euro won't be so attractive. Some people are saying, well, it won't be used. I don't go in this direction, but I do agree that many potentialities, including for monetary policy, which could be created by the digital currencies, won't be in the case of the euro, because of this resistance of the banks and the lobby they are making. In China, it may be different. Okay. And then Latin America and Senegal or the African Union, the Western African Union. In Latin America, I always like to give the example of the system we have for payments in national currencies between Brazil and Argentina. You're probably aware that in 2009 it was created. It's an interesting system. The idea was precisely that exports, imports, Brazil, Argentina could be done in reals and pesos, and less than 5% of it is done in the national currencies. Why? Because Argentina, Brazilians as well, but even more the Argentinians, for reasonable reasons, if they export, they don't want to receive pesos. They want to receive dollars. So it's just one example that we can try to design this kind of arrangements, and it's important to design them. And it's important to learn with the mistakes and trying to correct and try to give stimulus in order to foster the usage of national currencies. But they are not enough, right? That's it. The dollar trap, to use Prasad's expression, is very strong. And in Latin America, maybe more than in other regions of the world, the dollar dominance is still very high. So I think it's very hard to create a a unified currency, as was the proposal. But there are things to do, it is small steps. So again, coming to the multilateral banks, we have CAFI, for instance, right, in Latin America, which could provide more loans in the national currencies. We could try to create swap lines and together with the creation of mechanisms for bilateral trading in the national currencies. So all of that is possible. And the creation of new platforms, digital platforms, may be helpful, but not the solution. And the same for Africa. I will repeat myself by saying that, well, the core of the problem is not in the technology, right? So the mere fact of having CBDCs won't help be the whole solution. But again, if we manage to create a platform, for instance, hypothetically, many other countries of the global south start going to the bridge, right? It won't mean that the dollar hegemony will come to an end. Again, there is this problem with the foreign exchange operations. It's still not clear if it's possible to avoid the dollar as the vehicle currency. But for the it may be a way of fostering the usage of the national currencies. And there was the Volcker. Then it's also an interesting question. We have to think on different time frames. But in the short term, it's the opposite, right? Because, and for a very clear reason, the new head of the Fed will be appointed by Trump, and then he won't increase the interest rates, right? But if we want to go beyond the simple question, the important thing is that they can do unpredictable policies in order to keep dollar hegemony. This they can do, and then they won't repeat themselves by doing exactly the same policy. But as I was saying, they have the power to react in a very powerful way in a kind of a new Volcker policy in order to make the dollar attractive again. It's true that currently many people are saying it's not reliable anymore, but this whole thing on stable coins may go in the direction of creating indirect dollarization in countries which are so far not dollarized. So it's a tricky moment, and it's always true that they can do a Volcker policy too, even if not using as the only tool the interest rates.
So we have just I think 2-3 minutes left, but what I suggest is perhaps to take 2 more very quick questions. I don't think we can do more than that, and short responses. So apologies for those to whom I won't give the mic. So one there, and perhaps on the last one. One there, yeah, perfect. So you can start.
Yeah, even though we know that the cryptocurrencies are not a real currency, isn't this a too easy answer to fend off the threat of the ultra-rich trying to establish power through currency? If we look at Peter Thiel and Musk and the libertarian ultra-right in America, that there might be a political process in place that is taking place that has to be also fought against, that there's an actual danger of the ultra-right trying to dethrone the dollar and replace it with their type of different currency. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Luis. I'm from Germany.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jonas from Switzerland, and I got a brief question on Trump's opposition to the CBDC. Isn't it, or like that's just a hypothesis, isn't it also because his family has now invested a crazy amount of money into crypto, or like they kind of created these crypto coins, so they have a vital interest as the Trump family to oppose it?
Very good question. right. I forgot mentioning it, but it's not only about geopolitics, but in his case, personal interests play a role. And today's Financial Times has a news on that. They measure, I don't know, but the amount of money that they won after Trump's election, or Trump took office, with not only with meme coins and all these kinds of things. So we are totally right. It's about geopolitics and about business in his case, and in the case of many of those who are around him. You're totally right. And then your question is really good. And there are, well, possible scenarios, right? But one of the scenarios, which is the one Trump and his government are trying to push for, is the one in which the stable coins will dominate, right? And why is it different from the other crypto assets? Because they are backed by the US dollar. And then in this case, in principle at least, all stable coins which are issued should be backed by a liquid asset in US dollar, normally treasuries. Meaning that, well, when this it's a pair 1-to-1, right? One stable coin, that or whatever, is $1. And so the point, and this is the fear that now the Eurozone has, if stable coins start being used, and I don't know if it's if it's high risk or not, but this is what the ECB, they are saying the whole time. If stable coins in dollars started being used in here, in the European economy, people will start thinking and making calculations in dollars. You know, because if you pay in Tether, and one Tether is $1, and then finally, all over several years, people are making their their payments, and then their calculation, and then it becomes a kind of an indirect dollarization. And at the same time, since those stable coins are supposed to be backed by reserves, liquid reserves, and as I said, normally treasuries, the increase in the issuing in the volume of stable coins means directly an increase in the demand for treasuries, for US public bonds. So this is also something that is probably in their minds. Currently, the total volume of stable coins in the world is around 300 billion. 270 to 300 billion dollars, meaning that, well, not everything, but let's say 200 billion dollars in treasuries are in the assets of those stable coins issuers, and it will increase a lot. And if it increases, it will increase the demand for US public bonds. So it's a way also of reinforcing or the dollar hegemony, or at least curbing the tendency for reduction in the dollar hegemony, you know, to curb this process. So when we think about crypto assets, it's one thing. When we think about stable coins, it's related to the dollar. And then for the big techs, for instance, X or Facebook or whatever, they are being pushed to issue stable coins. And that's the point. Then issuing stable coins backed by the dollar, it's good for business for them, but it's also pushing for the maintenance of the dollar hegemony. That's the point.
Thank you, everyone.